Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Early in the week, and this is the show on SportsNetUSA.net. As always, Corey Nayland here, Mark Pavlovich up in the top square with you, Ed Ford on the ones and twos, making sure we're up and at 'em to bring you exciting community college athletic talk. Tonight, our special guest is Chelsea Davis, Palomar soccer head coach of the women's team. How you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us and braving on air with the guy up on top because he talks a lot and he has a interesting takes on football and soccer, however you want to say it. As we asked the last coach, Mark Corbett, up in Napa Valley, which do you prefer? Is it soccer or is it football?
I prefer soccer, but that's just because I grew up in the U.S. I have been around a lot of British, and they constantly are saying football, though.
All right, so we've got soccer coach Chelsea Davis, head coach, new head coach for Palomar Comments. And Mark, where are we going in this interview to start us off tonight?
Well, like always, Chelsea, it's really nice to meet you. And I always know that most of the people that come on the air with us aren't known about everybody else. The people that have been watching the show know too much about Corey and I and say, old guys, move on. Corey, first I've got to tell you, though, she's the sort of coach athlete that you appreciate because she wasn't a one-trick pony athlete growing up when she went to high school. She was a fantastic pitcher for that other game that we love, softball, and also a soccer star. So multi athlete here that Corey Nealon appreciates in anybody, be it a man or a woman. So give us a little about your background, from the Northern California area in high school to your journey through college and how you ended up getting to Palomar.
Yeah. How long we got? No. So I grew up in Northern California, and I did play a fair amount of sports growing up. I know it's a little different these days. A lot of kids tend to stick to one sport earlier, but I was fortunate that my family put me in a bunch of different sports when I was young. Swimming. First sport was baseball and softball. And then I played volleyball. I really liked softball and soccer. Obviously, I started soccer pretty young as well. And my dad coached me until I was about 13. And he said, I think she's all right. Maybe we should actually get her a trainer. I didn't start playing competitive until I was about 13. And then I played softball in high school as well, just because I liked, I love athletics. I did love soccer. Obviously, I'm still doing what in the soccer world of today. But my softball coach, I kept leaving practices early and to get to soccer. And he said, well, you have to choose. And I said, well, you don't really want to know my answer about that one. So I continued on to play soccer. I was very fortunate. I had a really good club coach, and he opened up opportunities to get recruited. I had it in my head as a young student athlete that I wanted to go out of California. So I actually spent my first year at University of Houston. Didn't fit for me, but it was a good program. And then I transferred to Fresno State for my remaining 3 years, and it was absolutely fantastic. Loved being there. Great athletic support. Did well when I was there. We had 2 conference championships, and we made the NCAA tournament. So we had a good group that when I was there, which was really fantastic. After that, if you want to talk about dual sports, I actually played a 5th year of lacrosse. So on a full scholarship. And that was just a luck of the draw there. They needed to fill out a roster, and I needed another semester of school. So I actually did play a 5th year of lacrosse as well. And then I went on to play some semi-pro in San Francisco for the Nighthawks. Still in touch with the manager today. She's fantastic, Jill. And actually got my first coaching gig because the head coach of Academy of Art University at the time was actually the head coach of the Nighthawks semi-pro team. So she knew I wanted to continue on and get my master's degree. So I hopped on as her full-time assistant for Academy of Art University and got my master's in multimedia communication, actually with an emphasis in sports broadcasting. That's what I was kind of out to do. But I started coaching and I veered left. So I actually got my master's degree in multimedia and never did anything with it. But I had some fun interviews. I actually did co-interview Kobe Bryant, Michael Huff from the Oakland Raiders, so that was fun. And then actually I got the opportunity to play overseas in Sweden, Division I for Bolsanas. Was out there for about a season, came back, continued traveling a bit. I lived in Australia, coached for University of Sydney, came back, coached at my alma mater, Fresno State, which was really, really fun to be back at, and kind of ended my college career until recently at University of San Francisco for almost about 3 seasons, back in Northern California. I coached club the whole time, and got the opportunity to take the position at Palomar, and I couldn't be happier. Amazing athletic director, really good staff coming in. He's got some really good, new hires that are looking to turn the program around, and just I've got a bunch of really committed girls right now, so I'm very excited. Bringing in, I also work for San Diego Surf, which is pretty well known around the Northern and Southern California club scene for soccer. So I work with a couple teams there. And then one of my good friends, Emma Greenwood, she also works at San Diego Surf. She's joining me as my assistant at Palomar. So we have a really good working relationship. And she also has done the college scene. She's coached club for a bit. She's national licensed through U.S. Soccer, same as me. So we're definitely rearing to get going, just because we've been locked down for so long. But so far, it's been really nice, starting out in this new environment, kind of taking it, day by day.
Cool. So at 13 or so, when you made that decision of playing soccer instead of softball, what is it about the sport that you just gravitated towards and love so much?
Oh, there's so many different things, but I'd have to say the main thing was your freedom of creativity. Soccer is one of those sports that it's uninterrupted, and you get to kind of step out on the field and play the game the way that you want to play it. Of course, your coach is, depending on your coach is going to coach you, but you can't really call plays when you're out there. So, that's one of those free-flowing sports. I loved the competitive edge of it. I love the ability to read the game, to read the players, to break down, see different patterns in my head of how the game would break down. And that's something that I just gravitated towards. So that was probably the biggest thing, is the free flow of creativity that you get.
One thing, Coach, that I've noticed about soccer, and you brought it up about playing club, so I've got to go through high school and college, is that soccer allows you to be that offensive player and that defensive player at the same time. So what aspect of the game when you were a youngster did you truly enjoy, the offensive side or the defensive side?
I started out, I played every single position as a younger player. I think I started as a left back, and I ended as an attacking midfielder. So yes, I like the attacking side of the game. I also started as a defender, though, so I have an appreciation for it. I mean, as they say in every sport, defense wins ships, so you can't forget about it at all. But I ended up being kind of shifted on to an attacking center midfielder role, and never looked back, pretty much. I didn't get put anywhere else after that. Oh, did we get to...
And so on the pitch, you're out there, you're in attacking mode. Do you bring that attacking type of style into your coaching?
Yes, I do. I wouldn't say my style is that I want every player to be able to have their own sense of creativity. So I'm a bit more of a guided discovery coach than a coach that's going to tell you what to do. I think the way that I see the game, I can give them situations and opportunities of how the game can be broken down. Of course, there's some very many black and white moments in soccer, but there are a lot of gray areas. So a way that I break down a game and I see the game is an option for them. And I think every coach, I don't know if there's any soccer coach out there that's watching it, but there's been moments where you stop a moment at practice and the play ends up ending in a goal. And you almost just want to have one of those moments. You're like, well, that's just one of those moments. You kind of got to kick yourself for that. But I want them to be able to break down and see the game that they see it, because I think that that's the beauty of soccer. So I will give them as many options as my brain sees it. And if they see it a different way, I will guide them to that way. And I think that you have the opportunity to bring in different players that see the game differently to vary their style a bit.
So in doing what you did, where you played soccer all over the world, you did different coaches all over the world, what bits and pieces did you take from whom, and who taught you the most from a coaching point of view that you could take forward to your players?
Biggest part, I'm taking bits and pieces, kind of honestly, throughout my playing and my coaching career. I have worked with some very, very good coaches along the way. It comes from my club coach being able to present opportunities. I was a very kind of a raw talent when I was 13. So he actually drilled me a bit harder in terms of how to read the game. And I didn't like him for good almost year and a half, but he made me a better player. So I can't necessarily fault him for it. And then going on to college, when I transferred to Fresno State, I had over several years had always been a starter, and so I'd gotten used to being a starter. But I kind of slacked off over the summer, going into my sophomore year at Fresno State, and there was a pretty intensive fitness test that we had to pass, and I didn't pass it my sophomore year, and that meant that you couldn't start. And I didn't know that. So that drove me a little crazy, but he said it was the principle of the fitness test, right? He said, there's other players that deserve to start over you because, he's like, you might be better than the players that are starting, but you didn't pass the fitness test, and it's the principle. And I think you do have to hold some sense of standard. I do think you want your best players on the field, but I do think that you have to hold some type of principle and standard when it comes to that. I'm a real big believer in work ethic. So there's that, going off and playing to Sweden, their technical side of the game is fantastic. I couldn't get over how well I could play a ball to anyone on the field, and the technical abilities. They could just trap a ball in a dime. And I really was kind of like, wow, interesting. I see a lot of clubs around the area that are just based off of solely athletics. And I think that you can I think that the U.S. is getting there, but I think that that's a big part of it. The technical piece, the mental players, the players that can break down games, and then you have the athletic players as well. But I don't think that necessarily needs to be the U.S. soccer style of play. And then coaching with, Fresno State, very, very good and very smart coach. I took so many different sessions from him. And then obviously coaching for USF, he just knew how to develop a program. I mean, he could recruit. And he showed me the A to Z process of how to recruit players. And he's done a fantastic job at USF. And I definitely know what it takes to flip a program and to help a program. And then, currently coaching at San Diego Sturf, I'm surrounded by fantastic coaches there. And I learn from them probably every day that I'm out on the field, whether it be we're planning sessions together, I'm watching a session, we're doing games, So I have taken little bits and pieces of pretty much everywhere that I've been. And that's why at this point where I got the head coaching position at Palomar, I'm just ready. And I kind of know what I want to do with that program.
And speaking of what do you want to do, what do you want to do at Palomar besides win and turn around the program? What do you have in store for them?
I mean, that's the end goal, obviously. But currently, right now, I am really big on creating a positive team culture and making sure that the girls are all on the same page. It's been an interesting year with COVID, and a lot of them lost touch. They maybe lost a little bit of love for the game. So my biggest thing is creating team culture for the spring, getting to know my players individually, what motivates them, what they've been through the last year. If it's been difficult, I have some players, it's been difficult for them this past year. Getting back into fitness, staying fit, getting on the ball. I mean, it's fairly, I wouldn't say simple because my players right now are They're definitely tired because I'm working them every day, but I'm sending them workouts and we're doing Zooms. We're not on the field, but it's for me, creating a team culture is the biggest part for me for spring. And then obviously when I get to the recruiting aspect of things, recruiting and players for fall, and kind of making sure that every year we're creating some form of positive jump and getting a 2 to 3 more players in, more of a, recruitment over time thing. But the biggest thing right now is team culture.
And coach, to stick along with that, my question is, because soccer, I dealt with club soccer for years through my son. I find soccer to be one of the few sports that you really have to be a mind reader, because you can realize that all of a sudden you're going to get open and break free. I've got to know you're going to do it before I end up sending my pass down the field. How do you instill mind reading into soccer players? Because I really do. When I watch our national women's team, I watched them again the other night, and I'll watch them in the championship tomorrow for the She Believes tournament. They actually look like they know what's going on before anybody else does. And it can't just be set patterns. It's got to be something else. So how do you ingrain that into a player?
Yeah, it's not easy. I think that it should start at younger ages. I do know coaches that I'm speaking honestly and freely here. There are some coaches out there that are more of the joystick kind of coaching, which is basically they're telling the player what to do given every practice in the game. They're saying, Jessica, take a touch on your right foot and play Sally. Sally, you then play, Teresa. And that doesn't give them confidence, and it doesn't give them a creative ability. I think that there are, like I said, there's some black and whites. There's a lot of gray. And for me, guided discovery, where I stop a situation where there's multiple ways to breaking it down, and I ask them what they see. And that's the whole team kind of, being around that and seeing that, and then them hearing what they see. And then other players then get to know how that player sees the game. Right. So it comes from repetition. It comes from players being around each other. It comes from a really good team culture. Positive team culture where players trust each other and they're going to work for each other because they know everyone is on the same page. So I think there's a lot of different ways you can implement that. But for me, I do my best to try to learn the way their minds break down the game. Give them options. Obviously, I don't want to just leave it at that. Right. But make them build on it. Why do you see this? Well, what if this player shifted here? Now what do you see? It's not necessarily me saying, okay, if this player shifted here, then you play this pass. It's if this player shifts more to the inside, away from the line, now what do you see? Now how do you break that line? And I think that's how you can create that, because all the players are obviously hearing it, and I'm allowing it to happen. I'm not sure if I solely answered that question, but that's kind of.
No, you did. You did.
No, you did. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like you're a jazz musician as a coach, because you're out there and you see things and you feel things, and you're trying to get that on the field. We're talking to Chelsea Davis, head coach of Palomar women's soccer. If you like the soccer talk, go back. We just had another interview across in Scotland from Jason Perez on the show with Duke Jacques, who plays for the Sudan national team. So you want more soccer talk or football talk, go ahead and check us out for the past show last week with Jason Perez. And you talk about that, Chelsea, Coach, you talk about that that joystick type of playing. And you talked about the specialization of sport. Can not being so specialized in soccer and playing alternate sport, can that help what we were talking about in that last question and answer that Mark asked?
Yeah, I do feel there's multiple levels to that. It was a different time that I played in, and I think that I was fortunate that I was able to play those sports as long as I did. And I don't feel like that would hinder players per se, but I do feel on the competitive end of things, you do lose a little bit more. I'm not saying you should specialize at 5 or 6. I do see that quite often. But I do think it is a little bit earlier in terms of specialization. They kind of do have to make that decision a little earlier. Like I said, I played in a time of the competitive soccer was there, but it wasn't quite as competitive as it is today. But I'll never tell that to my players. I'll never tell them you have to specialize. It's a decision where, I've got a 2009 team, and they're fantastic. I look at the way they trap a ball and they play, and I think about how I was when I was 11. I'm like, I don't think I could do any of that. And that's just natural. Like, that's just the way soccer is going, especially on the girls' side. And so starting a little bit later doesn't mean that you can't catch up. But I do feel like if you're splitting time, especially at the older ages of the 12s and the 13s, you might fall behind a little bit. Again, doesn't mean that you can't. It just means you might have to do extra. And the specialization early too, there is an injury component of that, where especially on the girls' side, there is more injuries earlier, ACLs that you're seeing from specialization that's earlier. Again, you can do more agility, you can do more training with that. I was, knock on wood, probably genetically blessed, but also I think cross training and myself playing multiple sports really helped with my body and movements and injury prevention later in life. Basketball, swimming, volleyball, softball, all of these sports are activating different muscles that you don't necessarily activate in soccer. And I do feel it stabilizes you. So there is a definite positive in playing multiple sports. I also feel like it doesn't make them burn out. If they really want to play, soccer, they're gonna tell you. I mean, at the younger ages, they might not necessarily know, but like my dad waited and was like, well, whatever you want to play, you can play. And I was like, I love soccer and that's what I want to do. And so I was able to make that decision, at that age. And so there's a kind of a multi-level answer for you. But yeah, I think there are positives, like fantastic positives of playing multiple sports. I'll never tell a kid to just only play soccer.
See, and this shows you why she's a coach and could have been a sports broadcaster. She just gave the answer to my next question about burnout. So she could have done that. But let's stick again. I'm going to go back onto the field because, Coach, I've often wondered this. I've often thought when I watch soccer that the quarterback of the team, and I know you can really say, Mark, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've always looked at it as being the goalie. And then when I say that, who in their right mind wants to be goalie on a soccer team? Because when you lose, it's the goalie's fault. They gave up an easy shot. So, I mean, and do you have a special coach that teaches your goalies? Because when we did club, we had a goalie coach. So are you the goalie coach on your team also?
We do. We have it. We'll bring in an assistant for that. And mostly just because you obviously want to do a lot with the team, but they do have very different training than the rest of the team. Their explosiveness, their mental capacity, if they need to stay focused. There's most colleges have some form of assistant that works with the goalkeepers or has some form of goalkeeping experience, just because it is so specialized. And I think that's a really positive thing. My assistant and I will work with the goalkeeper, this spring because it's minimal, but, and we're not able to really do too much right now on the field. Actually, we can't do anything right now. But when we get onto the field, yeah, I'm like, oh, we can't do too much. But it's like when we get onto the field, come fall season, I will be hiring an assistant for a goalkeeper. But I'll fight you on that because I do. I'll fight you on that. I do feel like I build my teams around midfielders, but that's because I was a midfielder. And I think that they're the core of the team. But that's just my personal. little biased.
I wondered if I was going to get any static on that one. So,
well, that's okay. This is my favorite interview thus far that we've had on the show on SportsNetUSA.net because Coach said Mark is wrong, so we can end this now. But next question for you is now if fall is a long way off and you're doing there's a COVID situation, you can't get on the field. How does community college soccer and community college athletics, how does it stay in people's minds now? How do you promote it and moving in this time with it? There's no action on the field.
Yeah. I've done my due diligence, to be honest. I've had some help. The men's coach at Palomar has been a fantastic, kind of mentor for me coming in, learning the landscape of Palomar, the recruiting aspects of things. I obviously have some connections of my own. So as soon as I got hired on, I picked up the phone and started calling all the high school coaches I could possibly think of in the area. I obviously have some connections with club as well. So I reached out and had those connections. In about 3.5 weeks, I went from 0 to 22 players on a roster. So I have 22 players on my roster for this spring. And that was me basically making the connections, talking to the student athletes, watching video. I had to do my due diligence because there was no team. So it's me basically staying in the ears of the club coaches and the high schools around. And, hopefully high school opens back up quickly and I can get out to some games and start recruiting. But I do have multiple high school coaches that I have been in contact with that have no problem sending players my way, that actually are excited to send some players my way, club as well. So I think come fall season, we'll be looking pretty good going into fall. And then obviously I'm going to go out and do my recruiting on my own when I can. So it's basically just I had to get my name out there a little bit. I knew, like I said, I had some connections already within the area, so that was easy. But getting my name out there to, more of the North County schools and the high schools that didn't know there was a coaching change or necessarily didn't know much about me, I had to just introduce myself and kind of go from there. Actually had a really nice conversation with one of the other community college coaches in the conference. Just was excited to have me on. He was also a high school coach, in the area. And I emailed him without knowing. And I was like, oh, no wonder you didn't email me back about sending me players. Like, I don't blame you on that one. And, but he's like, you know what though? Like some of those high school players don't want to travel as far as where I'm at. So I'd be happy to connect you. And that's just what I feel like it's about is really making those connections within the community and pretty much me just staying on it. So that's what I've been really trying to do since I got hired.
So we look at the women's national team that has a great deal of bright, articulate young women that are on that team. Some that are political activists, some that are social activists, and they've done it because they have continued in their education. So being an educator, how do you let your soccer women know, hey, you're not only athletes, but you represent much more than that, and it really starts in the classroom. So being an educator, and for the years that you've gone, how do you get that involved and ingrained into your women's intellectual atmosphere to say, hey, school's just as important as playing the game?
Apologies, that was my cat. So in the, I've been actually in charge mostly with my assistant positions at Division I's of academics. And so I kind of know what that looks like in terms of staying on players. They always say, and I'm going to say it again, it's called a student athlete. Athlete's not first. So for me, I want to make sure that these girls, young women, especially at the community college, some of them have struggled in their pathway to find what they want to do. And so I want to make sure that that's the first and foremost, if they have a pathway, what that looks like. I want to provide opportunities for tutoring and academic support. I recently did that. Actually, I was working on that most of last week in terms of setting up some of my players that need some more academic support with tutors. because my goal for them is to be able to continue on in whatever capacity. And that's a success for me. You know, I would love to absolutely, and that's my goal, is to push on players to the next level, to, you know, Division II, Division III, Division I around the area, you know, when we get to that point. But I'm failing myself as a head coach if these students aren't continuing on their education. And so that's a very big thing for me. My student athletes, they do know that. And so that's one of the top priorities for me in terms of what spring looks like, as well as making sure that these athletes are, the student athletes are doing well in classes. And it's tricky because a lot of them they've been on for a year. They've maybe fallen off because a lot of community college players, they have to work. And so they're trying to balance being a student athlete with work, with classes. They're trying to figure out how they fit it in. And sometimes, you know, because they have to provide, you know, sometimes their classes fall off. So I told every single of my student athletes this spring that I'm gonna provide that opportunity for you, and I will have that flexibility for you. If you can't make a Zoom meeting, or if you can't make a workout because of work, because of classes, you and I are going to touch base individually, and we're going to figure out what that looks like. So I have schedules basically for a lot of the individuals where I reach out to them outside of a time that they mostly do with the group, to make sure that they're getting on track with everything that they have to do.
And once again, head coach for Palomar women's soccer, Chelsea Davis. And before we let you go, Mark, I know you got one more question that you wanted to ask.
I got about five, man.
Then I ask two more questions, and then we're going to ask what we always do at the end of the show. So you got one more, because I got one more also.
Yeah, I really do, because I always do this when I have the opportunity to talk to a women's coach out there. I mean, Chelsea, let's look at the national team. The only time anybody really follows soccer is when they're playing for a championship. I'm going to say it right now. Nobody cares about men's soccer. We care about women's soccer. But let's be realistic. On the national level, our women are not respected as soccer players. I'm sorry. They don't get paid the same. The only time we talk about them is when they win the World Cup. So how do you instill the pride of being a woman who is an athlete and a coach into your women that play for you? Because I watched a show the other night. I hate to make this long-winded, but it was called Unapologetic. And it was Black women athletes who said, hey, I'm a little tired of doing the same thing a man does. They get praise. I get nothing. So I've got to ask you, as a female coach, how do you instill that in your young women?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be a little bit of a struggle. I think because, I mean, I can speak to it as a player. I didn't have any opportunities after. I think some people, when they graduate, student athletes, when they graduate college and they still are an elite athlete and there's no opportunities, it can be a hard transitional year for a lot of players. And that's unfortunate, but it is getting there. There are about almost double the amount of women's athletic soccer teams in the US as there are men. So in college, there's more opportunities actually for women's soccer players to play. Now, when you get to the professional level, the women's national team players, they are paving that way. I see it every day. With my 09s, they love the game. They have dreams to be an elite player. And these are players that are 11. And it's because, and they're walking up with Rapinoe jerseys and Haran jerseys. And so and I'm not telling them, they know. And it's not even that. These girls are talking about the Premier League. I mean, it's happening. You know, these young girls, they're gonna be a part of the story. And especially with my Palomar, players as well, they're playing because they love the game. That's the biggest part, is making sure that they still love the game. And no matter what impact, you're going to be a role model. There's going to be freshmen that are coming in and looking up to sophomores. There's going to be a part of the game change that they're all going to be a part of at some point, where you look back and you're like, wow, I was able to witness the women's national team winning the World Cup. I was actually at the final in 2015 in Canada, in Vancouver. So, I mean, I got to witness that. And I'm like, I get chills when I think about it. So I think you have to instill that you have to be a part of the story. You can't just think about maybe right now. You have to think about what you're creating for the young players underneath. And for right now, it is extremely present right now. I think it's, again, on the grand scheme of things, no, like I would agree with you, but it's getting there. And I think the women's national, the professional leagues that there's, talks about different professional leagues starting, the pay is getting bumped. There's more opportunities for players to go overseas and play. I got paid well when I was in Sweden. And I tell every single player, if they get the opportunity, go overseas and expand your mind. Get the opportunity. If you get the opportunity, go. Like you're not going to regret it. If you hated it after a month, you hate it. But if not, you're going to get paid to play a sport that you love. And so, I think that you just have to talk to them. And I actually had a conversation with my Palomar group couple weeks ago. I had them watch a documentary, and in the documentary, it went around to a bunch of different countries and basically different countries and how they play soccer. And it was in the streets, it was taking two shoes, it was creating a goal. And I said that, we are fortunate. We are extremely fortunate. You are fortunate to be able to get free gear at Palomar and put on your cleats and walk up to a beautiful turf field and be able to play the game that you want to play. So I think that there's a bigger picture to it. I'm trying to paint the fortunate position that everyone is in the US to be able to play. And then the bigger picture where the role model, you're female. Every time that you're stepping onto the field, you're representing females all over. So I think they've bought in. I think that they're starting to. I think that they love the game, but I think they're starting to see it a little bit more in terms of what it means collectively when more women play.
Definitely. And the love of the game, you exude that. And last thing with this, we always want to ask our guest, what does our audience need to know about you or the game or your program that they need to know? So what do they need to know about you, your game? Yeah.
I'm honest. I work hard. I'm 100% doing this for the players, and I want them to have a fantastic experience. Support the team. It's been a rough year for a lot of college soccer players. It's been a rough year for youth sports. It's been a rough year for everyone. So if you get the opportunity, go support your local teams. It'll mean the world to them. And just, believe in the next part of women's soccer. I think the more support that you can give all the generations coming up and all the current generations is the bigger it's going to get as we move on, every year after year. So, yeah. And if you saw this and you just come say hi. I'm always open for a conversation. I know you mentioned that, I stepped into, a bit of a chat. Was it Mark? Were you a bit of a chatterbox? You probably met your match. I do talk a lot. So if you ever recognize me, just come say hi. I'm always up for a chat.
Well, we will take you up on that one next time we're out that way. Mark?
Corey, I always like to, when we get to meet these wonderful people that we have met through doing the show every week, you're extremely refreshing. You're totally honest, which you've already brought up about yourself. And Coach, I appreciate you being the educator you are and being the mentor to young women. I think everybody needs a mentor to help guide them along the way. And Palomar College is extremely fortunate to have gotten you on their staff, because you're going to bring nothing but success, not only on the field, but also to the future of all the young women that meet you along the way. I think they're going to be very lucky to understand what life is going to be about. And I love the fact, Corey Nayland knows I smile, I still use that phrase, student athlete, even with our football players. We've done football for 18 years. Thank you for looking at your student athletes as student athletes. You are totally refreshing, and I wish you nothing but success. And I hope someday when you win the state title and the national championship in soccer for community colleges, that you'll give us a call and say, hey, you guys still doing the show? Because, oh, yeah, by the way, Mark, it was the goalie that won the game. So let's hopefully that'll happen.
I will.
Just had to correct you there. But thank you.
You'll be my first call. Don't worry.
All right.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Chelsea, and thank you very much for joining us. Chelsea Davis, the head coach for Palomar Comets women's soccer team. Again, for Mark, Ed, I'm Corey. Thank you for watching the show on SportsNetUSA.net.